Welcome, all friends, to a brand new day, a celebration of faith in a special way. It's New Year's Day, and what a treat with Restless Podcast, Take a Seat. Join us as we continue our journey so bright with TGC's top stories of 2024 Part 2, Out of Sight. We'll look at the news, the trends, and the strife that shaped our theology, our communal life. From the highs to the lows, the sacred to the strange, we'll wrap up the year with stories of change. So let's toast to the tales. From joy to the test, with the Gospel Coalition, we are truly blessed. So gather your loved ones, your coffee, your tea, for insights, reflections, and pure festivity. The 12 Days of Restless, Day 7.
So, Pastor Michael, apparently 2024 for Colin Hansen was a bit of a downer year. Was not an upper year, but we are doing the top five stories of the theology stories for this year for TGC. And so we hope that there is some more good news here. But we, just so you know, we are not letting anyone get blackpilled here on the Restless 12 Days of Restless.
No black pills 2025.
No
right?
black pills. But if you are feeling a little bit down, may I recommend you head to spindlesandscarlet.com, promo code Restless for 10% off soap that is guaranteed to be more of a white pill than everything we read about yesterday from Colin Hansen.
Not just soap, by the way. You can get candles. Here's the thing. I'm not even kidding about this. This isn't me making this up. But the conventional candles that you just buy in the store, generally speaking, are more damaging to you and your lungs than smoking. And they don't have the benefit of increasing your testosterone. So they're really not good, right? No added benefits. But at spindlesandscarlet.com, you can find small batch, high quality candles that are scented with all essential oils. And so now it's interesting with candles. There's very few essential oils. You have to know what to use. There's a lot of people out there trying to make essential oil candles, but there's very few essential oils that work well with candles to actually produce a good scent. And so my wife has done a lot of work on that and has developed several different kinds of candles that you can find there. So Restless 10% off at checkout, and support the show, support my family, support my wife, support small Christian business and the kinds of things that we're doing.
So the number 5 story of the year is, we're not quite on the headline, theological educators seek foothold amid overall slide in student enrollment. Looming demographic decline, along with lower Christian affiliation among millennials, has long spooked theological educators. Pressures related to race and sexuality in the last decade have further strained Big Tent evangelical schools that depend on recruiting new students, often recommended by alumni. Gordon Conwell Theological Seminary recommitted to on-campus education thanks to proceeds from real estate sales. Wow. The president of Trinity Evangelical Divinity School resigned as school's leaders recommitted
their alma mater. There it is, everybody.
Their affiliation with the Evangelical Free Church. Facing its own financial headwinds, Fuller Theological Seminary seems headed in the exact opposite direction as it reconsiders previous sexuality standards. Fuller professor Christopher Hayes has joined his father Richard, retired from Duke Divinity School, in authoring a book that suggests that God has changed his mind. Meanwhile, ongoing enrollment growth can be found in Southern Baptist schools upholding historic Christian orthodoxy.
Yep.
So, Pastor Michael, if you are related to TGC and a lot of your living comes from the large amounts of money that are flowing in these schools, that might be a problem for the model.
It really is the same story, though. It is the same demographic and theological decline that you see in the main line and with the population as a whole. It's the same story. It's all actually deeply connected. And as you put it in our last episode, It is the judgment of God. But part of it too is just bad. Like it is bad educational models right. that are built on the idea of always growth, right? The population is always going to be growing. And then as that begins to slip, this fight over trying to get every last person in the door. And so, for instance, at Trinity, which is my alma mater, like you have, he talks about this, increasing, this increase of ideas about, race and sexuality and that influencing students and stuff like that. Well, what do places like Trinity do? They try to go full sail into that stuff, right? Hey, we're going to it sounds like an exaggeration, but a large portion of, I sometimes say everybody I knew except for my friends, but just to, tamper it down a little bit, a large amount of the people that I knew at Trinity are like, they are either not walking with the Lord or they are wildly liberal today. They went on, I knew people that while at Trinity became, democratic socialists, like that became their thing, right? Or there were groups meeting on campus that really focused heavily on all of these race issues and things like that have divided the country, and very much a kind of woke agenda. And that was pursued as like a good, like that was seen as a good thing to really push into because we're going to get more people in the door. But that doesn't work, right? When you are an educational institution where the only thing that sets you apart is Orthodox faith, then when you start losing the Orthodox faith, looking for other things to set you apart, what you end up doing is just, you're not set apart at all. There's nothing about you that makes you interesting. And so they've continued to struggle for that very reason.
Right. And again, to be clear, once again, the differentiation between those that move away, right, from Orthodox teaching, all of these things that seemingly should work, to open the doors, does not. All right.
It is good, by the way, just one shout out to Trinity. They did, to try to connect back to the EFCA, the Evangelical Free Church, is a good move to have that denominational mooring. There's going to be a more conservative Christian influence on the university because of that. And I think that's a good thing. Now, then again, I read recently that something like 70% of all EFCA pastors don't think that you need to be baptized to be a member or take communion. And so they have their own issues, but it's at least a step in the right direction.
Not our way, not the way we do things. But
as I joked with a buddy the other day who's currently at RTS, and he's talking about his classes on, sacraments and ecclesiology. And I joke about how, so much of my education at TEDS was like, I don't know, maybe women should be pastors. Have you really thought about it enough? And it's like, I need to think about that for about 30 seconds. Read 1 Timothy. It's decided. All right, let's move on. And then it's like the next class, maybe women should be pastors. Like that was the whole thing.
Yeah. All right. Well, still, things are going well at TEDS. At least they're going better than they are in France, according to Colin Hansen. Way to pick on France. Paris flaunts post-Christian buffet before Notre Dame Cathedral reopens. Few events can still elicit a truly viral engagement. Actually, many things can. TGC struggles to elicit a truly viral engagement, but many people are very successful at that. But on a fractured social media, the Paris Olympics gave us two. Algerian boxer Imane Khalif confused everyone on the way to a gold medal by dominating the undermanned female competition. And because he wasn't clear, this was a man. Like this was he didn't say this.
Is that like a little shot where he says an undermanned female competition?
I guess. After the opening ceremonies launched millions of hot takes and even hotter rebuttals over the Last Supper parody, the latest sign of a decadent Western culture that can tear down the past but can't generate a vision for the future. Mockery, though, at least indicates cares about religion and hasn't lost all of its Christian memory. And if you're apathetic and forgetful about your religion, you probably don't go to such great lengths to rebuild one of the best-known cathedrals in the world only 5 years after you thought Notre Dame might disappear forever in the flames. So Western culture, specifically France's decadence, is one of the... I don't know that deserves to be number 4. I think a lot of those other stories I'd take above
No, it
that.
is an interesting contrast to think about. Like, I forgot about the Olympics thing. I told you that, I very often forget things like this even happened this year.
Yep.
But it is an interesting contrast to have on the one side that, this opening of the Paris Olympics being incredibly secular, and then on the other hand, the reopening of Notre Dame, historic cathedral, historically standing for, Christendom, the Christian faith, which also had issues, by the way, but it is an interesting contrast because they did attempt to make things very close to the kind of traditional original that it would have been, as much as possible, it seems, in the reconstruction of Notre Dame.
Yeah. So again, I think it's a sign again, right? The idea of, in the end, even things like the Olympics, right? There aren't going to be neutral spaces, right? These things are going to be ran into the ground or moored in something greater. So let's move on then to number 3, as I didn't find that. Again, I think that there were a number of those stories that could have been higher. So Cast Review tells the truth about transgender treatments. I asked cultural commentator why the report, led in the United Kingdom by Hilary Cass, the largest review ever undertaken in the field of transgender health, barely registered in the United States. Easy answer. Turns out because U.S. hospitals and doctors backed by the Biden administration make a lot of money from these so-called treatments despite their ineffectiveness. This month, the U.S. Supreme Court took up the challenge to Tennessee's ban on some procedures for minors, and will rule in June. Expect court cases to mount as parents become more aware of the dangers associated with gender transition and flee public schools where administrators and teachers conceal these irreversible treatments. Church leaders can help by studying and teaching theological anthropology. All right, Pastor Michael, I don't know what the Cast Review is. Apparently,
I did hear about this. Basically, there was a large scale study that shows what everybody with eyeballs knows.
Sure.
Okay, what everybody should have known already. You didn't need an academic, not theological, but an academic paper of some kind to prove, quote unquote, this. If you chop off the genitals of a child, or if you give them children hormonal treatment so that they do not enter puberty, it is not healthy or good for them.
Right.
That, like, anybody who thinks otherwise is literally an insane person and should have zero voice in any decisions about public life ever again. Okay? Like, that should be obvious to everybody. I don't know why it's not. But I'm serious. I would very quickly agree to any measure that takes away any voting rights, any authority. Like, people that agree that that's a good thing to do, they should only be allowed to work menial labor jobs for the rest of their life. They should not be able to make decisions anymore. Right. And I'm laughing, but I'm pretty serious too. I'm pretty serious. I'm worked up. But I'm pretty serious about that. It's so insane and so corrupt and so evil that it's hard to imagine. So it's true that there was this large scale study, but it didn't make any waves in the U.S. because it was actively kept away. It was actively kept down by actors in the Biden administration and others because there is a massive monetary benefit to various hospitals and insurance companies and things like that to have things like transgender surgeries and life-altering, lifetime hormonal procedures and things like that. And so they made it so that, most people didn't see that. Now, even if it was available, again, people have already denied what is obviously the case. And so it wouldn't be hard for people to deny that as well. But It has reversed decisions in a lot of places like the UK on doing some of these procedures that continue in the US. One thing I noticed, by the way, is multiple times Colin Hansen has taken direct shots at the Biden administration and at
Yeah.
the Democrats in ways that he has not seemed to do in the past, which I take again as the vibe shift. TGC feels it. They got to get on board a little bit. That there's a massive movement against the Democratic Party, the things the Democratic Party stands for. And that is actually a hopeful note. I think that's a good thing.
He's not insane enough to have said something this time Kamala, because obviously that would have been lunacy had anyone ever posted that on Threads of all places. I mean, obviously, again, the year 2025, the year of life, everybody, tell anyone in elected office, you as led by the PCA Church, want all these procedures to end. They should all be done. And if hospitals are monetarily backing this, then it would be a monstrous crime against humanity. So, there you go. It is the truth that and again, everyone could tell you. The other thing I think everyone should be ready for is obviously this push that has been made is not going to last, and you are going to need to eventually learn how your church will minister to people who were taken in by these things. And so, by the way, and those people are not going to be impressed with churches that were like, well, maybe this is okay. Like, that's not going to be. Right. They're going to need a lot of actual mercy and love in ways that may be uncomfortable, but it's not, well, aren't we, that was all okay. That's not the kind of mercy and love they're going to want to receive along the way. But it is a thing that I do believe he's probably right, that the world, and hopefully our country along with it, there will be a shift in the acceptance of this as something we're just now doing in the public schools.
Lord willing. Massive massive shift on that topic.
All right. Number 2, Gen Z shows signs of spiritual revival. Around 2016, women began taking more progressive views on subjects such as abortion, leaving churches and challenging them to bridge a growing gender divide. In 2024, and this is an interesting sentence, for the first time since pollsters began asking, men identified as more religious than women, or at least they did in Gen Z, where church offers refuge from rampant gender confusion. Consider the more than 14,000 students signed up for CrossCon, one of the conferences.
I know you're right in the middle of it, but it's crazy that's his, like, they get a bunch of people every year. It's just like a big evangelical conference. Anyway,
CrossCon, baby. It's the sign. It's always the conference. It's always the conference, everybody. Sign up for CrossCon or hear prominent Christian testimonies alongside mass baptisms on college campuses, where you can sense the rumblings of revival. Gen Z has borne the consequences of pandemic closures and therapy influencers, so it makes sense if they also benefit from the church's efforts to foster resilience through catechesis and spiritual formation. I don't know what that last sentence means, but so Pastor Michael,
it's the kind of thing that a lot of Gen Zs would make fun of, rightfully so. God bless them. This is why they're some of our favorite people, because they would instantly make fun of that kind of speaking.
That is completely true. That is what that is what that would mean. So let's talk about this. I think you and I are both we're in agreement in that we believe that this is at something at least to be hopeful about, if it's not apparent. Yep. Let's go to the more interesting statement, and then we can talk about our understanding of it, because it might be a bit different, or at least we might not word it so flowery as Colin Hansen. Let's talk about this. Men in their generation being more religious than women for the first time. I mean, basically, at least for the vast majority of American history.
Yep.
So I don't know, and I don't know how.
Probably Christian history since medieval times. I mean,
Yeah.
that's how long standing it has been that, you know, it's kind of expected that women are generally more religious and more often in the church. But especially in the last few hundred years, it's a known reality. And increasingly so in the West over the last 100 years or so, a slow kind of decline in the men who are part of it. And that's actually the story, by the way. The story is not Gen Z shows signs of spiritual revival, although that is true. It is young men show signs of spiritual revival.
Yeah.
And arguably where young men go, now this is creating a massive, an interesting and massive kind of shift, because a lot of Gen Z women are increasingly progressive, like it said. Like they're actually increasingly wicked, like increasingly moving into incredible and heinous sins like abortion and sexual promiscuity and things like that. While at the same time, you have this huge resurgence in young men desiring not just church, but the non-fluffy kind of church, right? Like they want a church that tells it straight. You have the rise of men who speak like men, from either from the pulpit or from other places, like on a podcast or things like that, that have become incredibly popular because of that, right? And so that's actually the story, that young men are showing signs of spiritual revival. And I think that is for sure a good thing. Where young men go, so goes the future. Where young men go, so goes so goes the women, so go the country, so go everything. That is where it goes. Which, by the way, hey, young men who are listening to this, I wrote a book during a sabbatical this year that I'm tentatively calling Old Thoughts for Young Men. And I will send it to you. I'll send you a PDF. All I have is a rough draft PDF right now, but I will send it to you for free. Just email the podcast or find me at Twitter at Pastor M. Bowman, and I will send you that book because I think it'll benefit you.
I certainly agree that in general, and I would say both men and women, in my experience, but I have no doubt based on my what appears wider experience, men, Gen Z planting what would be viewed as a fairly conservative or traditional Presbyterian church. The younger you are at our church, the less you the less you care, and by that I mean like you're like, oh, what's kind of going on. Now I will say that is with a distinct group, because this is what I'm actually and this is what makes the statement about women and men, this gap existing, interesting to me, because what I find is I do believe there is an increase. I agree that there is this increasing desire for these things. However, the other thing that I think is also true is there is still the vast majority of them, right? Which is why Gen Z makes fun of things like NPCs, right? People that are not awake. But I think that there are a lot of them, and it's either maybe from their own personal experience or things they've seen or the ways they like just the access they have online is they firmly have become aware that the way things are is not working and can't work. And so they're very willing to try, and they're willing to seek all these, other means and other things. And what makes me wonder is our culture seems to be more antagonistic and destructive towards men than women. And so it makes me, if the way I think I kind of understand these the Gen Z people I know, as the people have been like, no, for however we came to know it, we don't want any part of what's kind of going on here. And then they've turned. If that is the case, to me, it would make sense that men would be more quickly doing that than women. And also men, the way they engage online, they're going to be more quick to find these kinds of voices and influences that would actually encourage in that kind of journey.
Yep.
Pastor Michael, the number one theology story, by the way. Just to be clear,
I love that you keep saying that, because most of these are not super theological, but some of them a little
I'm
bit.
sure number one, Pastor Michael, do you think number one is going to be a super theological
Of course
story?
it is.
Number one, Trump wins the presidential election with Donald Trump retaking the White House in November. What if? Questions about considering how close he came to assassination in July. Oh, we know how close it was, by the way. We do know. Has he been spared to do good? Question mark. As with all other leaders, we pray he will not be a terror to good conduct, but to bad. Romans 13:3.
Yeah, I hope he is. I hope he's an absolute terror to bad conduct. That sounds awesome.
The Lord prescribes that supplications, intercessions, and thanksgivings be made for all people, for kings and those who are in high positions, that we may lead a peaceful and quiet life, godly and dignified in every way. Our theology of providence reminds us to thank God for the good he allows and the evil he restrains. And it tells us that God has purposes, whether in blessing or judgment, that aren't always evident in the moment or even in our lifetime. So it's kind of tough to tell if it's good or bad what happened.
He does leave it a little ambiguous, but let's just say Trump won, and he didn't just won, he crushed. He absolutely crushed.
Whatever he won with, he has an absolute mandate.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, and be a terror. Be an absolute terror to the bad. That sounds so good. And that's biblical, by the way. I use language like that, and some people are like, I want to be careful. I'm like, that's his job. His job is to be an absolute terror to those who do evil. Hey, we've been talking about him, by the way, right?
That's
people that mutilate the bodies of children, people that build things like suicide pods, right? Guess what? He should be an absolute terror to those people. They should not be able to sleep well at night because they know that he is coming for them. You better watch out.
You better
not cry.
So I do think, and again, here's one of the reasons this should be the number one theological story for TGC of the year, is it means it's like we should be having a moment in the TGC editor's room, whatever that room is like, and having a moment where we go, man, we have totally misread where America was going.
It is.
We do not have any. We do not know. Yes, we are not
all
sure.
The cultural transformation guys, all the cultural liturgy. We need to read what's going on. All of them were wrong.
Right.
All of them. Right. Every single one of them was wrong in the same direction. And that should lead to some soul searching about why exactly that was.
Right. So I don't know if these are necessarily good things to call theology stories, but like maybe it's like Christian news or like
stories that impact the church.
Yeah, that'd be
a good way to put it. Stories that impacted the church this year. I think it's a pretty fair list if you put it that way.
I think so too. And so that again, which is interesting. Again, it's interesting. Colin Hansen says the number one story that impacted the church is the election of Donald Trump. And that is just that is an interesting thing. And in 20 days, everybody, from this good New Year's Day, Donald Trump will be, as far as we know, sworn into office, save some strange engagements from drones. He'll be sworn into office, and the soap you used to use will be outlawed. It will be gone. And so now is your chance to get the soap. Get the soap, everybody. The 12 Days of Restless are brought to you by Soap. We will be back again tomorrow. We can't stop. All the other podcasts do, but we are keeping on going. We will keep going for 12 days at least.
Restless will return tomorrow, and we will have a very special announcement.